I pressed go live. Now it says we're live. And because I don't believe it, okay, so now what I do is I go to my profile. I've got this down to a science now because now I've got 2 accounts doing it. So I go to my profile and I'm going to see if we're truly live. So let me just double check that we're really live. And no, I don't see it that we're live yet. So I'm going to wait for people to join us because I don't believe technology.
Yep.
I don't believe we are live. We did it. We're live. We did it. And I see people here. So I didn't believe it until people tell me that I'm live. Right? Otherwise, I just don't believe science. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everybody else. And I see Gary Faulkner here. And Gary, let's continue our conversation one day because I'm so interested in your business. And I see Mustang Girl here. And now I see people joining us. So now I'm not only convinced that we're live, but we're really live. So that's awesome. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And Nitin, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Adam, for this opportunity. And let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm a media entrepreneur. I run 2 digital platforms in India, which are bharatshakti.in, which exactly is actually celebrating its 5th anniversary today in India, 25th of November. We started in 2015 on this day, and we've come some way from there. And the second digital platform that I run is called stratnewsglobal.com, which concentrates on foreign policy, international relations, strategic issues. bharatshakti.in is mostly on defense and defense policies and acquisition and procurement. That's what I do for both for a living and as a passion. I have been a journalist for 37 years, started in 1983. I love traveling to border areas, to conflict reporting is my specialty and has been my specialty, of course. Done wars in Kargil, a war in Sri Lanka, several insurgencies. And I'm an author, done about 7 books on military history, insurgencies, biography of India's first external spy agency chief, R.N. Kao, last year. And before that, a couple of books on India's defense and security policies. So that's me in brief. I love traveling. I'm a cinema buff, mostly Hindi cinema and Hindi music. And apart from that, of course, I lead a team of about 15 people who are my best support and my best kind of the colleagues who make this 2 digital platforms very vibrant, and they're there for you to see. And I'm happy to be here with Adam to discuss maybe defense, China, procurements, and what have you. I mean, whatever Adam now.
Yeah. We've got a lot to talk about. I'm so excited. And I've been a fan of bharatshakti for so long, and it's really been my go-to. So in America, we don't really have an equivalent. Maybe Defense One, but it's kind of like a combination of all the defense-oriented websites, and then you've got your own editorials there. And the way you've done it is kind of like a Drudge Report almost. I mean, it's just so comprehensive, and I'm such a fan of it. Military and defense industry is something both personally and professionally very interesting to me. I love technology, and I saw years ago, part of my investment thesis, right, is that the world is bifurcating. We discussed that with Valina, and I know you know Valina. And
right.
Alliances that used to be a lot more fluid no longer have that luxury of kind of mixing and matching and kind of ad hoc type of relationships. Now they're really getting solidified. And there's a high potential for war, right? And it's probably higher now than it's been in many years. So we've got a belligerent China. We've got a lot going on in the South China Seas. And what would be a great place to start is your recent Rambo adventures in Ladakh.
Yes.
That was awesome.
In fact, I was there exactly a month ago, and I went there after 4 or 5 years, and basically Ladakh was a kind of rediscovery because India and China have been facing off nearly 40,000 soldiers are facing off each other, eyeball to eyeball across eastern Ladakh frontier, as all of you know, and it's a high altitude desert, dry, desolate, completely remote from mainland India. And it is a region which India's first Prime Minister had described as a place where not a blade of grass grows. And so,
Really?
why not a blade of grass grows?
I didn't know that. I saw videos you took of it, and we'll discuss them in a second because the geotagging and the whole Twitter thing was so remarkable, and I want you to discuss that.
Right.
And I didn't realize not a blade of grass grows there, but now that you said it, you're right. Nothing.
Absolutely. It's something that it's a high altitude desert, as I mentioned. Basic altitudes range from about 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters to about 6,000 meters. Very difficult area, and winter can be very severe and is harsh. Even about a month ago, the temperatures were down to minus 10 degrees Celsius. And of course, you're short of breath when you are walking. You're short of breath when you're walking there because you're not acclimatized. The altitudes are difficult to operate in, and that's one of the difficulties that the soldiers face.
And let's discuss what you are doing there and your kind of discovery. And we're on Twitter now, and this is Periscope. It's Periscope and Twitter. They kind of coexist, I guess. And it was really interesting because you're like Rambo, and you did geotagging there, and you saw the way Twitter had geotagged it.
In fact, yes, the Leh is the capital of Ladakh, and on a Sunday, which was 19th of October, I just went to the war memorial there to do a live for my audience and my followers on Twitter, saying that I'm here and I will be bringing you reports. And when I came back, I wanted to look at the recording again. The first thing that strikes me is that it is showing location Republic of China. Now that really shook me, and so I asked my camera person colleague, "What location did you put? I think you made a mistake. I think people are going to roast us for this." He said, "No, sir, I had put in Leh itself." I said, "Okay, let's try again," and we tried again, and then again it came up as Leh, People's Republic of China. That's where my antennas went up, and that's where I then 4 hours later I brought this up again and did a live broadcast, bringing to everybody's attention that Twitter is doing something wrong. It is showing Leh to be part of China, especially at a time when there is this standoff happening on the border, not very far from where I was. And it looked as if it was deliberate. It was a malicious intent with which this geotagging was done. So I attracted everybody's attention. I tagged.
You got my attention. And it was interesting because it shows the way Chinese Communist Party, and we have to discuss the Chinese Communist Party because there's such a belligerent state out there, and they've expressed that in a lot of ways. And one of the ways that they've expressed it is how they've intruded into our own kind of technological apparatus here.
Yes.
And they use what's called discourse power, which has a lot of money behind it, right? And Twitter really obliged them, which you and I spoke about, that Twitter was very obliging to this discourse power, the control of the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, indeed it is. And the irony is Twitter is banned in China. Despite that, Twitter is obliging the Chinese Communist Party. Twitter is taking investment from the Chinese and the Chinese Communist Party, I'm sure. And that is why the power that the Chinese Communist Party holds over big technology companies in the United States. And I think they somehow have got entangled into the Chinese web, which is now creating its own problems. But I'm glad to report that today one user of Twitter in Leh was tagging something about one road there. And today, after the government of India wrote a protest letter and a warning letter, and the parliamentarians also warned Twitter, they have now finally corrected it. So now Leh shows as Leh Union Territory of Ladakh, which I'm glad to say within a month or so this has happened.
Yeah, and but it's actually such a significant thing because war expresses itself in so many different ways, and particularly with India. And we're going to get into it in a lot more detail. And I also am going to be respectful of people's time, so we're going to cram through it. We have a lot of questions here, and for you, it's late at night.
Yes,
so,
of course.
Give us the cue when it's over by yawning. As soon as you go like that, when it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wars express itself in so many different ways, and diplomacy is one of them. And another one of them is water wars, which we saw that kind of with data sharing agreements, the lack of a data sharing agreement with water in India and the floods. And then we also saw that with the Doklam standoff. So before we can discuss a little bit of the military, let's discuss why that military is kind of important and its kind of geopolitics and its region and the threats within the area.
Oh, well, first of all, Tibet, which is the origin of many of the rivers that come into India and then go to Pakistan, is the source of water for most of Asia, not just in India and Indian subcontinent, but also in Southeast Asia. So that is something that the Chinese have used as a weapon and can use as a weapon going forward. But the Indian military has had a couple of run-ins before this in Doklam, before that in Depsang itself in 2013, and Chumur in 2014. So it's not something that is new to Indian military or to the Indian decision makers, but this time the scale and magnitude of the standoff or the intrusions that the Chinese tried in Ladakh is far greater than any time in the history since 1947 between India and China, of course, from 1949. So that's something that I think the world is watching, how India is dealing with it. And the Indian military, of course, is, as you know, is 1.5 million strong, out of which 1.2 million are ground forces, the army, and rest is the air force and the navy. So that's where we stand, of course. And Doklam has one more addition or one more angle, that it has a third country, Bhutan, into this. And Bhutan is being increasingly pressurized by China to settle the border with China, that is Bhutan and China border. But because India is an important player, Bhutan has resisted so far in settling that border, and China doesn't like it. China doesn't like anybody standing up to them. It's a bully. It's a aggressive power. It's a belligerent power which thinks its time has come. It is the only power in the world, is what it thinks. But I think the world is pushing back very hard, including India.
Yeah, India certainly is, and it's interesting. And I see so many interesting questions, and they're better than anything I could ever ask or even ever think of. Right? Is Americans are used to kind of observing the Chinese Communist Party and not having a real appreciation for, again, the way wars express themselves. So for you, well, for India, right? War is a constant threat. It's a constant threat because they can also agitate your neighbors. And, we'll discuss Pakistan a bit because of the S-400 and, some of the drones that I think you guys are going to buy, because I have an insight on that. I know a little bit there. And the S-400, as well as why you guys need to build up an indigenous defense industry, right? Because you can't really rely on Russia anymore to procure. You guys were the biggest. Russia was your biggest supplier until U.S., man.
True. In fact, there are several questions packed into this. So S-400s were actually meant for air defense, not just along the Pakistan border, which is a live border, which sees a lot of bloodshed. On the China border, there is no bloodshed, but I think S-400's ultimate objective, in my assessment, is that it will provide the protection or the air defense on both the Pakistan and the China border. If it works on the Pakistan border, India is likely to ask for more S-400s for China border, because China is showing aggressive intent, which it had not shown for so many years. So that's S-400. Why indigenous defense industry is required? Because you already answered it partly. Russian equipment is getting outdated. It's getting antiquated, I would say. It's older. but therefore India needs to have self-reliance in defense. One of the key taglines I have on Bharat Shakti is self-reliance in defense. That's because if you want to become some kind of a power of consequence as a nation state, then you must have your own ammunition manufacturing. You must have your own defense platforms being manufactured instead of depending on foreigners, be it the Americans, be it the Russians or the Israelis. And that's where I think the Modi government has done a big difference. Make in India, Atmanirbharta, which is self-reliance. And I think that one must take note of. And that is going to be the key determinant of how India becomes a power to reckon with in Asia.
And at the same time, as you've been scaling down from your reliance on Russia, and while you're waiting, it takes generations to build up the indigenous industry with the defense industry within India. You guys have actually, I think you just signed a data sharing agreement now. And we'll go into that in just a moment. But then you've also had a lot of substantial contracts for, I guess, for air defense weapon systems, right? That was a big contract that just happened recently. And
Right.
then the purchase, which,
Of the Predators.
What is that?
Of the Predators, the General Atomics platform, the HALE, the high altitude, long endurance drone that just leased. In fact, they've announced it today. 2 of them have been leased from General Atomics in the company that is based in San Diego, and 30 more are likely to be bought by India. They're expensive platforms, but they are very essential for India.
Yeah, and does the friend or foe systems in any way interfere with those drones? And if you want to explain that really quickly, and then at the same time, you guys have recently bought the A-64 Apaches, right? You bought the Chinooks, you bought the Seahawks, which are the helicopters that give you a lot of water cover. So you guys are really scaling up, modernizing your defense industry, and the procurement all top of the line.
And the United States has really contributed to it. Nearly the purchase from the United States is reaching cumulatively about $20 billion over the past 15 years, including the Apaches and the Chinooks and the C-17s and the C-130s. And of course, the Romeo MR60H are being bought for the Indian Navy, as you mentioned, for the sea cover. So certainly India needs all this because India has 2 active borders, 2 live borders, potentially a collusive threat, a 2-front war, or at least a 2-front threat is now manifesting itself, if not a war. And therefore, the US has been the reliable partner, as I mentioned, for the last 15 years, if not earlier. And that's where I think we are going to look at the data sharing agreement that you mentioned, the BECA, the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, which enables India or Indian military to get real-time intelligence, spatial, the geotagging and the geospatial data from the United States. So therefore, this was the third of the foundational agreements, as we call them. LEMAO is one, COMCASA is the other, and the BECA is the third. So I think it can't be better. The India-US strategic defense partnership, at least, if not the trade part of it, but defense partnership in terms of both intelligence sharing as well as platforms being supplied to India and the interoperability.
So going forward, now with perhaps a change in administration, because I don't want to get into the kind of political dynamics here because it's kind of besides the point, is but going into some unknown unknowns, right? Well, the known unknowns, the known unknowns is in your own thinking, like what happens if there is a Biden administration, because the Obama administration had held back some of the military defense contracts, and they said they didn't want to kind of intrude, which was surprising, but it was what it was. They didn't want to take too much side between Pakistan and India. Trump then became much more the salesman because that is what he does. And so now going forward, assuming a Biden administration, right, a known unknown, what then happens with those defense contracts? Are they satisfied? Do you see more defense contracts happening?
Well, I think the defense relationship or the defense contracts will go on. It is central to the India-US partnership or alliance, or you want to call it whatever. But the fact is that the Biden administration, the potential Biden administration, will be a little more vocal on issues like human rights, on Kashmir, on what India should do with Pakistan. But I don't think there will be a material change as far as the defense partnership is concerned. One, because they've gone too far ahead to turn the clock back here, and second, I think whichever administration takes charge in the United States in January 2021, it will require India to be a counterbalancing force in Indo-Pacific and against China, and that will not change. So I don't see, and Joe Biden is no stranger to India. He was VP, remember, to
Yeah.
Obama. And Obama may have started with some kind of a hostility towards India, but finally he became great friends with Prime Minister Modi. And in fact, they hit off very well. He came to India during Modi's time. Modi had a great trip to US when Obama was president. So therefore, I don't think that is going to really change materially, except for these small little things of human rights and holding India
Do you?
accountable for what they call democracy being throttled or democracy being undermined. All
Yeah.
those fixed, pet peeves or pet theories that they have that will
Yeah.
come in. I think fundamentally it's a very robust partnership.
So do you see, would you anticipate, and again, there's so many unknown unknowns, so this is all really just speculation, but would you see with perhaps an improving relationships between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, does that in any way compromise the security of India? Like, how is it thought of there?
No, I don't think so. I don't think even Biden or sort of more softer US administration, softer towards China US administration can afford to antagonize India or even sort of tell India to pipe down or compromise with China, because that's something which is going to be harmful for any United States administration in the long run. So I think it's they're mutually exclusive. But as I mentioned, in Indo-Pacific, India is the central force as far as the United States, Japan, and Australia is concerned. And remember, Quad has become a reality now. Exercise Malabar this year was a high tempo exercise with anti-submarine warfare being practiced, interoperability, two carrier battle groups exercising together and doing it over a longer period than ever before. This has happened after almost 13 years. So I think we don't really need. I think I don't worry about Biden administration compromising or mending fences with China will impinge on the Indo-US relationship.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. There's a lot of questions here, and I'm going to pepper you with them, right?
Sure.
So we're going to start off with Interior Foliage. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us. Interior Foliage asks, does China influence think tanks or media in India like they do in the United States?
Well, partly, yes, not to the extent it does in the United States, because we don't have as many think tanks as in the United States. Of course, there was a period between 2000 and 2010 or 12 when the Indian media was wooed very actively by the Chinese Communist Party, by the China government. I myself have been on a couple of trips with the Chinese government to Tibet and to Shenzhen and to Beijing and Shanghai. But that notwithstanding, I think with this aggression and belligerence China has shown over the past 4 years or 3 years since Doklam, I think there is a cooling off that has happened. Between the think tanks in India, the media, large parts of media in India are no longer enamored by the Chinese hospitality or Chinese wooing, and therefore I don't think that kind of deep entrenchment is there in the Indian ecosystem like it is in the US.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. And now I've got my own question for you. All right.
Yeah.
Let's discuss the DRDO and kind of the startup environment, because Make in India requires a lot of new companies. and it requires a lot of new technology. And the big companies there, like Hindustan Aero, are unlike our own big companies. They rely even more on outsourcing innovation, right? So they rely a lot more on the startup environment there. So we're seeing a lot of urgency within the DRDO to build up the startup environment.
So I think what the DRDO is doing is basically it has identified, it has worked with the industry.
Let's start off with it. I said DRDO, and I abbreviated. I really shouldn't have done that. Can you actually start off with explaining the DRDO? And yeah.
DRDO is a government organization. Its full form is Defense Research and Development Organization. The mandate is to develop technology in association with industry, the MSMEs particularly, and of course then transfer that technology to both private and public sector undertakings or industry or companies, and then make sure that these are sort of user friendly and user trials take place. DRDO holds it does the hand holding of the smaller companies, has done a lot of I would say product development. And with the new regime, I mean, not so new regime now, but the Modi government has initiated several new schemes. There is something called Technology Development Fund, which is now part of the defense acquisition policy, which aims to create an ecosystem for enhancing cutting-edge technology capability by leveraging the domestic capabilities available within the Indian industry. So a lot of competition is taking place. There is something called the IDEX, the innovation competition, which is also a new category for buying equipment for the Indian Armed Forces, called the IDD, indigenously designed, developed, and manufactured. So I think the ecosystem is changing. DRDO is no longer allowed to get away by being a laggard. It is being held accountable by both the government and the industry.
And what I'm seeing is a lot of innovation from the US, in fact, also moving downstream, right? And it's moving downstream to India. So, I've had a couple of conversations. I've had a lot of conversations with the startup kind of environment there, which includes the Ministry of Defense and, advising them on how they can scale it really quickly. And a lot of it requires a lot of Indian students who got advanced degrees here to return, because there's really a shortage of intellectual labor. There's a shortage of highly skilled labor there, right? It is what it is. And at the same time, I've been a part of it, so I've kind of watched it as it occurred, the foreign domestic ownership. So I'm also seeing that I think a lot of the VC venture capital firms and private equity firms, which have now, I think, irrevocably moved away from investments with China, from cooperating with investments with China, are also moving into India, and they're really aggressively looking for very high complex innovation that they can't afford to do here. So that innovation is so expensive that it's a big team, high hanging fruit innovation. So they get a better yield in getting that innovation out of India. So I'm seeing startups that are doing international friend or foe systems, that are doing encryption, and that are doing communications with satellites, which is extremely difficult. Communications with drones, extremely difficult. A lot of stealth communications as well. Quantum teleportation, which is a type of encrypted communications. So what type of startups are you seeing there that have a lot of buzz within the defense industry?
Well, I think one of the sunrise sectors is about drones and anti-drones technology. Drone swarms are being sort of attempted to be created or attempted for Indian Armed Forces, because one of the fallouts of the standoff with China in Ladakh has been the need for cutting edge technology for tactical ISR, for instance, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And that's where I think a lot of companies or MSMEs or startups are coming in Bangalore or Bangalore, as it is called.
I'm in Bangalore.
Yeah, Bangalore.
I see a lot of startups that is a lot of people who have seen the ecosystem in the United States build over the last 10 years are now trying to kind of franchise it into India. And the foreign domestic ownership rules have changed significantly initially India thought they could do it entirely themselves. They had a tariff system that was kind of sloppy for defense, and I know you're an expert on that. And now they've really freed up the rules, so I'm kind of excited to see it because I'm always looking for the yield. Right, we're trying to get ahead of the curve, and if we can anticipate that there's going to be wars, horrible to say, but if we can anticipate that there's going to be wars, we want to win them, right?
Of course, and the return of investment, I can assure you, you're an investor, is going to be tremendous in India if you invest right, because that's something. India is going to be the biggest buyer of equipment, and also an ecosystem that is being created for innovation, for cutting edge technology. So a lot of these companies can actually come into India and do joint ventures. The foreign direct investment cap has been now raised, as you are aware, to 70%. That should be helpful to anybody who is wanting to look for new markets. And India is a very vibrant market, defense market.
We're going to skip on. And I see Avnav is here, so thank you so much for joining us. And I think you changed your picture because I like that picture. It's pretty cool. So you say if you had to suggest 3 books on the Indochina standoff, which ones would you recommend? And I'm going to say 2 books because 3, I don't want to kind of like prod you too hard.
Well, there are no books on the Indo-China standoff really. That question needs to be tweaked a little bit. On India-China boundary question, if you want to ask, certainly there are 2 books which are now done. One done by a journalist, a young upcoming journalist, Anand Krishnan, who was not talking about the India-China standoff, but it's talking about the China challenge, which comes from his experience of reporting China for 10 years by staying in China. He works for the Hindu newspaper, Anand Krishnan. That's a very recent book. And then there is a collection of essays by experts. It's called One Mountain, Two Tigers. It is edited by experienced retired civil servant, Shakti. And that gives you both historical perspective and looks into the future of India-China relationship and the tense relationship that it is going to be. But the military standoff really is very fresh. Maybe I'll write one book going forward, and then maybe Abhinav can read that book, and so can Adam.
And I'm going to add to that because I see Samir is here, and we all know Samir, who's got brilliant think. I guess it is a think tank. Is that what you would describe it as? And it's really the preeminent one in India, and I'm a huge fan of theirs. I'm always I'm regularly going to their website, and I would say maybe in the U.S. the equivalent might be Rand Corp. I don't know.
Heritage.
What is that?
Heritage.
No, it's not Heritage because Heritage has a real political kind of bias to it. And I think ORF has really tried to stay away from that because I've read so much of theirs and they really try and cover a spectrum because India has so much complexity. America has a lot of palace intrigues between the Democrats and Republicans and the way think tanks go and the way money flows and the intrusions into our political systems by the Chinese Communist Party, by a lot of other countries. India doesn't have all of those intricacies and palace intrigues. So I think ORF has done a really good job.
It's a fantastic resource that anybody wanting to understand India is looking for. Certainly, it's come a long way in the past 5 years or so. The dialogue that they do, annual dialogue, Raisina dialogue, is something to go to, look forward to, which is in January every year.
And it's well known within all the White Houses because I've known all the White Houses, and it's such a highly thought of thing. And I think recently our own FCC commissioner was there, or he spoke at it via video. I was really fascinated by his comments there. I've watched a lot of them, so we're going to skip on. But the first one we're going to go to, just because it's here, is my coffee mug, and it's big, right? It's a big coffee mug. So again, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Roy Kim. I really appreciate it. And we're going to continue on with Anand. And Anand, thank you so much for joining us. Says, since China's looking at upgrading its carrier fleet and super carriers in the next 10 years, is there a quad strategy, an adversarial quad strategy for that?
Oh, well, the Quad countries have already, I think, looked at it quite seriously, and all of them, in a way, are traditionally naval powers, if not superpowers. United States, of course, is a naval superpower, but even Indian Navy has its own standing in the Indian Ocean region. It is the preeminent navy in the IOR, the Indian Ocean region. Then, of course, the Japanese have their own, way of conducting naval operations and naval maneuvers. Australia is, of course, a naval power in that sense. So I think the Chinese are up against combined uh, threat. I won't call it threat. Combined, I would say, counterbalancing of these four countries, and they will have to really tweak their strategy because carriers are not easy to operate. For carriers, you need to run them or at least operate them for at least 30, 40 years before you have a tradition of operating carriers, carrier battle group, and which
Yeah.
the United States has really perfected. India has done it since the 1960s, late 1960s, although it has only one carrier so far, I mean, right now. But it is hoping to have two more, if I mean, not at least one more, certainly. But if money permits, then maybe two more. But therefore, I think the Chinese are up against it. They're not so well versed with carrier operations, and I think they will have to really work hard on getting that right.
Yeah, and I've because of my own interest, right? I've gone through translating a bunch of the speeches from their military generals at the Shangri-La and at some of the other conferences that they've done, and they've been really precise in saying that they've got a naval plan to exceed the U.S., but they give themselves till 2050. So
That's
and that's why, and sometimes it's difficult to explain to people how much it's one thing buying, like you said, it's one thing buying like battleships, right? It's another thing practicing and operating battleships and operating such a large navy. And do you see um, India having some kind of current, or do you see, excuse me, do you see China, as belligerent as it is, going about with some naval expeditions? Do you see them and naval expeditions and then their marine expeditions? And do you think they're going to go to war now? I mean, there's some countries they could really practice on, right? That's a scary thing, but it is what it is.
Well, one of the things that one must, when one reads China, one has to look at several aspects of the Chinese strategy and thought processes or philosophy. And I think one of the strategies that they have is to win without fighting, win without going to war. What they are doing in South China Sea have done in South China Sea over the past 10 years or so, or what they are trying to do with India or with Japan in East China Sea, it's something akin to what I call trying to win without fighting. Just do salami slicing, just do a coercion,
But do
and
you?
see. But they
Oh,
won't go to. They won't go to a full-fledged war. Is what my assessment is, and I think I would be not very happy to be proved wrong because nobody wants war. But that's their strategy: that you do salami slicing, you do military coercion, and see if the countries or the adversaries roll over, which they have been used to in South China Sea, but not so much in India in the past 5 years.
so do you see the targets that I would see, and then I'll tell you the targets that other people would see,
Sure.
is they need some easy wins, right? And the Himalayas is uh, is not really too much of a great conquest for China. It's almost demoralizing for China, right, to do that. But they've got scores to settle with Vietnam in their own. China right now thinks that they're settling a lot of old scores, right? They think that they're settling the 100 years of humiliation. I've discussed this offline with a lot of people and online with a lot of people. Much of which their own problems were their intricacies of their own creation, right? Because it's a complex place. So I see Vietnam being a potential target because we don't have any real security agreements with Vietnam, while as other people see Taiwan. And one of their concerns is that a more relaxed position against the Chinese Communist Party might cause China to be more intrusive into Taiwan. What do you think?
Oh, I think Taiwan is their first target, their first objective going forward. India, I think, comes perhaps third in the list of priorities. But they also know that India has to be kept off balance, has to be kept busy in South Asia itself. So they used to use Pakistan to keep India busy, but that has not really given them any long-term benefits. So therefore, they've started doing it themselves. But Taiwan is the first objective. Second would be Vietnam and Japan, if not the smaller countries in ASEAN region. And the third would be India. So I don't think they're willing to risk a war with India or a full-fledged conflict with India. They will continue with this strategy of one step forward, two step backward, or two step forward and one step backward. But this is something that India has, I think, gained quite well in the last 3 years or 4 years. And I think the first target would be Taiwan.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a scary thought, right? That's a really scary thought. It's a scary thought, Vietnam as well. But I would think that with Taiwan, and there's so many interesting questions here, so I don't want to get lost on it. And I'm sure Orf has written a lot about this, so I'm going to have to check them as well. But with Taiwan, we do have a security agreement that's at least 20 years old, and I just can't imagine that being the case. I can definitely imagine them pushing out a lot of their soft power. So America and the West has no soft power that we exert within China because it's such a closed environment. And China, the Chinese Communist Party, is even very militant against their own diaspora, right? They're very afraid of their own diaspora. Once they see democracy, right, they want to bring it in. And Me Too was a big threat in China. For people who don't know, the Me Too was something that the Chinese Communist Party really tried to stamp out. So I would think that they wouldn't go into Taiwan. I would think that they would just try and destabilize it politically. While as Vietnam, I think, is more of a target. I don't know. I've got to think more about it with the Rand Corp writings. But do you see China as part of their attack on India, their soft power attack, really trying to cause destabilization, like kind of societal destabilization, which is a war in itself, right?
Oh, yes. But that again, India has caught on to that game. And if you're aware that India has already banned so many of the Chinese apps, one installment of the banning happened just yesterday on Tuesday. 27 more Chinese apps were banned. A lot of FDI limits are being scrutinized, or FDI investments from China are being scrutinized. There is a relook at how telecom networks who used to be dependent and beholden to the Chinese Huawei and ZTE companies are moving away from there. So therefore, I think the Chinese, in their hurry to grab some land in a desolate desert, high altitude desert, have actually lost India as a market, as well as the support or the benevolence of the Indian people. They have, in one fell swoop, they have made 1.3 billion Indians their enemies, unlike what used to happen with the earlier regime. So I think that's where they have overreached themselves. They've gone wrong there.
Okay, we're going to go through a lot of questions because it's late for you, and I promise everyone these things go an hour. And I've broken that rule. I've actually gone to an hour and 40, and I don't want to do that to you because while we've been doing this Periscope, I think we watched the sunset in India, right? So because it's gone dark out there, right? And it's from Anand again. So we've got a lot of questions here. So I want to rip through them. And I think it's a really interesting question. And I'm not sure your familiarity with the precise details of it. So I don't want to overcomplicate it for you.
I'm not very familiar with this aspect of India's policy, but there have been reasons given out on both sides of the argument. I think a considered decision was taken because the fear here was in the Indian government that the Chinese would get a walkover, and their dominance in the trade regime under the RCEP would be too overwhelming for Indian companies and Swadeshi companies, and therefore India has stayed out of there. I think that's all expertise that I have as far as this is what is concerned.
That was good. That's a good. And we're going into like the speed round. right? So this is kind of like a Family Feud. Do you know that show, Family Feud?
Yes.
Okay. But there's only one buzzer. It's your buzzer, right? But you got to do it quick. So it's kind of like Jeopardy, but you're the only one pressing the button, but you still got to do it. So
the next Chinese intrusion.
Let me just ask, because some people might not be watching this; they might be listening to it. So I'll ask the question, right? It's kind of my thing too. But I want you to ask the question, but I just want to make sure, I want you to be responsive to it. I just want to make sure that people have a chance to appreciate the question. So the Emissary Company, the Emissary Co., thank you so much for being here, says, how should India approach the next Chinese intrusion?
Well, as it has approached the previous two, by being resolute on the border and reasonable in diplomacy.
Oh, you can go further than that. No, that was too quick. That was too quick.
No, but that's one line which I like: resolute on the border, reasonable in diplomacy. So stand firm. Don't allow the Chinese to overrun your positions. Militarily, be aware.
And standoff now, but we're currently seeing a standoff now that hasn't been in any way mediated. Right? We're seeing. We're still seeing standoffs between India and China, and China tries to win these standoffs by attrition. Right? They try and wait you guys out and let you guys lose your patience.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. In the last two big intrusions in 2017, or let's say three, 2014 in Chumar, 2017 in Doklam, and now the current one, India has adopted a very different approach than previously done by previous governments. One, that is that you take the military approach, a counter-military approach to the intrusions. Make sure that you don't give ground, don't cede ground, and continue to be engaged with the Chinese interlocutors. So it's a twin-track approach which has been adopted in the past 4 years or 6 years now, in 2014. I think the same way will have to be applied, because nobody, neither India nor China, wants to go to war for small intrusions or big intrusions like this.
But they do win those morale battles, right? They really do.
Because see, Doklam, they really lost in the perception of the world. Ask around, they lost there. And even in this one, after the initial setback or initial lapse on the part of the Indian military intelligence, I think they're doing pretty well right now.
And now we see Valina. So thank you so much for being here, Valina. And I know that you know Valina. So she asked actually two questions, and they're kind of back to back. So we're going to rip through those. Remember, it's kind of like the speed round Jeopardy. Yeah. So Valina asks, how will the security triangle between China, India, and Pakistan look like in the upcoming decade?
I think the theoretical aspect of what we used to call a two-front war possibility, or a threat of the two-front war, is now manifesting itself. There may not be a war, but the threat has become more intense from the collusion of China and Pakistan against India. And India will have to now tweak its policies, because earlier the policy was that we can take on Pakistan militarily, subdue it wherever required, but we can manage the relationship with China. But with both showing military aggression, I think India will have to tweak its strategy and then accordingly beef up its armed forces. That's going to be the trend in the coming decade.
And we're going to follow up with that. So thank you again, Valina. And Valina, it's kind of a continuation, right, of what she had just asked before, and her comment before is Valina says, will India join a U.S.-led alliance against China, and what role will Russia play in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. The Russians are showing a keen interest in coming into Indo-Pacific. They have had one small exercise with Indian Navy in the Andaman Nicobar territory, or off the Andaman Nicobar territory. And they would like to play a much larger role than that they have played so far in the, as far as Russia is concerned. As far as India joining a US-led alliance, but I think it's already made it clear that while it may not be a formal partner or a junior partner like other countries in the NATO, India is with US, and that is one of the reasons why I think Chinese aggression has manifested itself as it has in Ladakh, because China doesn't want India, more particularly India than any other country in Asia, to join or support US efforts to contain China. And I think that's already happened. The opposite effect of what they wanted has really taken place. What Xi Jinping wanted has taken place. India is now firmly in the corner where the US led effort to contain China is happening.
And Brian, thank you so much for being here. And it's a lot of numbers, so I'm going to go through it, but it's not an easy bunch of numbers. So it's Brian TH 378-95972, and it's a picture of Zorro, right? And I remember Zorro. I think it was a TV show for a while too. So Brian says China wants to dominate the region. That's why Trump's strategic partnership with India is vital.
Of course, it is. I mean, all the moves, all the discussions, all the agreements that have taken place between India and United States in the past 5 years point to the fact that both United States and India do not want China to have the have free run in Indo-Pacific or in the larger Indo-Pacific context. Of course, in both in South China Sea and the Indian Ocean region. That's why the strategic partnership, which is now has been strengthened quite a bit.
And thank you very much for that. And Kush, I know Kush. So thank you very much for joining us, Kush. Kush GRWL says most of India's industrialists who plan to invest in defense are bankrupt. And what is the future there?
Well, I think I know only of one Indian industrialist who has gone bankrupt, who had some interest in defense. But rest of them continue to have the interest and also are investing in defense. There are some new entrants who are not part of the defense ecosystem, have bought some companies which were doing well, smaller Indian defense companies, and are doing quite well. They're getting quite a lot of orders. So I don't see that happening. I think defense is an area where may not be the large houses, not the traditional business houses will come into it, but many of them are already there. The Tatas, the Kalyanis, the Mahindras, they're all traditionally non-defense companies, but they have all moved into defense in a big way. So I don't see that happening. The future is bright as far as the Indian defense industry is concerned.
Yeah, and it's interesting because within the U.S., our military contractors in the mid 2000s, 2009, 10, and so forth, particularly as Obamacare really rolled out, and our military budget, people were going through a war exhaustion, so our military budget was getting depleted, but our HHS spending, our health spending, right, was growing astronomical. So we had the military contractors winning and bidding for very large contracts, include General Dynamics. So those companies are a lot more flexible, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And they spend a lot of money lobbying too, which I'm sure has to be an issue there as well.
I think the ease of doing business in defense has been phenomenal over the past 6 years. Progressively, the opaque attitude has gone. The transparency that is there in the Indian Defense Ministry is something that I didn't think was possible if you had asked me this same question 5 years ago. So there's a lot of positivity there.
And we're going to keep going on because now Vijay Kumar is here. So thank you very much. And their comment and a question is a defense partnership, irrespective of the administrations in the U.S. or India, will continue positively. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, indeed it is. I think we've already spoken about it, that defense is central to India-US strategic partnership and the overall relationship. And irrespective of if Joe Biden comes there or somebody else comes there to the White House, this partnership will only grow and strengthen with time. And there is a lot of potential there, not just for buying equipment directly from the US defense majors, but also co-development and co-production in India going forward, the way the policies are being done.
Oh, thank you very much. And we're going to continue. See, we're rolling along quickly, right? Because I know it's late for you. And like I said, we saw the sunset while we're on this call because it's kind of dark where you are now, right? So Janan Glasgow, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to respond to the first part of this, okay? So, and then take over the second part. So Janan Glasgow says, asked, so do you think more US companies will start filing patents in India? Let me respond to that first. Is that a lot of the patent filing like that you see in Europe and in Sweden particularly are US companies that are filing patents there very early so they can claim certain tax inversions. And they need to show where the patent was filed, and they need to file the patent in that country as quickly as possible, and then have this very complex tax inversion scheme that is also requires tax treaties and certain tax routes. And so it's kind of this interweb of things. So a lot of patents that are filed, particularly in Europe, are American companies that are trying to seize that. And at the same time, you'll see a lot in Sweden, and that's U.S. pharmaceutical companies that are building up their inversion strategy there. So now it's your turn to respond to that.
Well, I think it's a little early to think of too many US companies filing patents in India. Because, as I said, unless US companies start manufacturing in India for exporting defense platforms or defense components from India to elsewhere, I don't see that happening too quickly. But I may be wrong. I mean, I haven't really kept track of that. But you are an expert, Adam, on this. But I think it's too early. Maybe 5 years down the line, there will be a flood of patents being filed in India. But right now, it seems a little difficult for me.
And we're going to continue on. So thank you very much for that. And Patricia is here. So thank you so much. And Patricia asks, what are the two biggest political and social problems that India will encounter in the near future?
Well, it's such a broad question, but I have believed and I've said this time and again that one of India's biggest problems will be the internal migration that is happening from rural India to urban India. The urbanization, the pace of urbanization in India is going to be one of the biggest problems that any country can face. I think the China went through that process maybe in the 80s and the 90s. India is now going to potentially face that problem, and that will bring its own social problems because the rural population coming into urban areas, the civic amenities don't keep pace. The infrastructure, if it is not built with planned, with plans that are able to accommodate all of them, then it's going to be a big problem. And of course, there is the ever-present communal Hindu-Muslim issue that has been there for centuries. People pretend as if the Hindu-Muslim problem has been invented or has come up only during the last 5 or 6 years. It's been India's bane for centuries now, at least 2 centuries, if not more. And that continues to be one problem that any government in India will face.
That was good. I rang the bell. See, I beat you to the bell that time. And Baba Yatsky, and thank you very much for joining us. And I recognize that picture as well. I have a good memory, right? And good memories are a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing because sometimes you want to forget stuff. So
Yes.
Baba Yatsky, thank you for joining us. Says, what are some of the key anti-drone companies in India?
I have no names to offer because I haven't really, I know individuals who have worked worked on some of these technologies, but I don't remember the names of their companies. And also, I think it's slightly early to look at that as a new ecosystem or a new segment of Indian defense companies. That's work in progress in as far as anti-drone technology is concerned.
And the emissary continues with that same question, that same line of prosecution, of questions, right, of interrogatories. So the emissary company, it might be the same question, in fact, says, what is the future of drone technology, especially after the effectiveness in the Azeri-Armenian conflict?
Oh, very bright, very bright. And I think that's going to be the future. It's going to be one large part of conflicts in the future, not very distant future, but very near future. And I think all countries, all military powers are gearing up for that. United States, of course, has its own ecosystem on drones and drone technology. India is waking up to it. Hopefully, it'll catch up very quickly. From what I know, several companies and several plans that are being rolled out right now.
And Janan Glasgow adds to to some of the previous points, the drone technology is patented in the U.S. but not in India, are public domain in India.
Well, I don't get that the question, because they're not. I mean, if they are patented, they are not in public domain, is what she means, I guess.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, some people have already filed for patents in India. Those who have drone technologies, I know a couple of them at least, and I think very in the very near future, in the next 6 months or so, you will find some of the demonstrations taking place for the Indian Armed Forces by Indian companies of the drone technologies that they have developed and have perfected. So patents, I'm not very sure where they are filed or not filed.
And we're going to continue because now we're in the super speed round. You know, the end of like Family Feud, right? And you have like the winning family, and then they go into like a booth or something, and they have to answer questions really quick, and then the other family member comes out and then messes the whole thing up, and they don't win anything, and it's sad, right? So the Emissary Company says that is a good book. I heard Pax Sinica, which
done by Samir Saran and a co-author. So he has done this. It's a good book. Certainly, I missed it. But the books we were discussing that time was about standoffs and India, China issues. It's a much larger canvas that Samir has covered with his co-author.
And
it's a good book.
And Samir also built a Pax Sinica conference, didn't he? Isn't that a big part now? I think I forget, is that the name of the conference that they do? The Pax Sinica?
No, that's the Raisina dialogue that they do every January. Raisina dialogue. Raisina is the hill.
That's it. Yeah, that's right. So again, I'm a big fan of Orphan.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Samir. And then Vijay Kumar adds India Way, Jai Shankar.
Well, that's more of overview of the Indian foreign policy. It's not exactly about China or India-China relations. It's a good primer about India's foreign policy and the changed approach to India's strategic, partnerships, foreign policy, international relations. It's a new book. In fact, we just read it. I mean, I read it just about 2 weeks ago. But that is not about India, China. Yes, it's a good book, certainly.
And we're going to continue. So it's Simple Plaver 034. So no, it's not. I said it wrong. It's Semplum Plevro 34. Okay.
Yes.
So they say, and thank you so much for joining us. They asked, does India have an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos when it comes to space innovation?
I haven't come across anybody as yet. Hopefully, they will be. In Bengaluru, there are people who have the passion and the ability, but they're not exactly Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, and do you want to explain as I go into the next question, and then we're going to go into a speed round. It's going to be amazing. You're going to love this thing. It's kind of it's warp drive. It's really cool. So except I got to get a bell for it. That's what I got to do next. So do you want to just really quickly explain the way it works in Bengaluru, kind of the renaming of it, as well as Hindustan Aero campus that they've got there, and then there's also the Boeing campus. And unlike in the U.S., there's a lot more collaboration between those companies. While in the U.S., they're all kind of competing entities. In India, they're all trying to kind of build something.
Well, Bengaluru is like to compare it to people for the benefit of the people in the US. It's like India's Silicon Valley. There's a lot of IT companies. There are a lot of innovation companies. There are a lot of technology companies. And Hindustan Aeronautics Limited is a public sector or government-owned entity, which is the only aerospace company in India which designs and manufactures a light combat aircraft called Tejas. Also, a lot of helicopters, the advanced light helicopter, the light combat helicopter. So they've done quite well for a company in the government sector. Bengaluru is also headquarter of the Indian Space Research Organization, one of the success stories in India. And they have created an ecosystem where you have a whole lot of ancillary industry and a ecosystem where small MSMEs are part of the development and part of the success story that has been created by these two entities. So it's a good place to be in.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that a little bit. And the next question is also about Space Force because I'm really into Space Force. Is one of the interesting things that I see happening in India, and it just shows you where all the opportunities are, is in flight trainers. Did you realize that? It's Hindustan Aero right now is trying to sell a whole bunch of flight trainers for the light aircraft, but they're now finding out that they don't have the technology to do it. So it took them till now to figure out how complicated flight trainers actually are. It's not like in the old days with the little simulators and you take off and it's there. It's really complex stuff. So it just shows you. And we're going to go on to the next question. And Tracy Lou, and I think I recognize the picture, so thank you so much for joining us. She says, sorry I missed the beginning. Thank you for joining us now. Question, where is India on pursuing a successful Space Force strategy?
Well, it's at a very preliminary stage, I would say, because India has been late in coming into this space. But I think there's already a plan in place. Some beginning has been made. A very modest beginning has been made on this, but I won't put it as a very important segment of India's policy as yet. But there's no reason why India will not catch up because, as I said, technology is available, capability is available. It's all it takes is to put it together, and I think it will be done in no time.
Yeah, so let me respond to a little bit of that also because I'm kind of involved in it over there. Right? Is right now the world is competing. Let's just say that the world is being bifurcated and America and China won, right? Because we are kind of where we are. That right now, that also has a lot of that also brings a lot of interesting problems in itself, and that is that innovation has become so expensive that China and America, and I think I said China and America had won the world, right? Is that China and America, the cost of innovation is prohibitively expensive. I mean, just our own airplanes are, you can kind of forecast out that we're only going to be able to build one airplane every few years. That's how expensive the F-35 and some of these other things are. And China has the same problems now. So a lot of the world, particularly in Space Force, is competing for the downstream innovation. So they're kind of really actively seeking out where they can get high yield innovation, high complex, big team, which means that it's not really going to be remote workers, right? Big team, highly complex innovation. I see India is, they just launched a Cartosat 3, right? And that was really meant to be, and you guys are building up a stealth now, are building up some stealth technology. And particularly, the Cartosat 3 might have actually been the first launch, I think, that had a policy from Lloyd's. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they estimated it was going to be a $1 trillion industry in 10 years. So right now, when I think of Space Force, I think of propulsion technology. I think of composite metals technology. As crazy as it is, I think of agriculture. There's just so much that I think about it, and but I also think of the data encryption because wars are going to be fought where you have satellites in space knocking out cities. Did you know that they're going to be knocking out cities? They're going to be beaming energy, but they're also going to be able to knock out cities. And there's just going to be a lot of battles up in space that are pretty kind of cool because we want to win. So I see India really winning the battle right now for the downstream innovation. I think Nigeria was trying. They had a lot of political distress with the Buhari election. I think South America has a lot of good indigenous talent and a lot of smart people down there, but they're going through their own disruptions. So we're going to see what happens with India, and we're going to see how much of the overseas students, the people that came to America, can be wooed back. Because I see that right now as a big difficulty, is wooing a lot of the American educated students back to India. It's an issue I discuss a lot. So with the DRDO and the folks within your Ministry of Defense. So so now we answered your question in two parts. So I'm probably a little bit more bullish than you are on it, but maybe that's because I see it a lot more intimately than you do. So
I don't watch on that so closely, but you're right.
You've got to. Let me tell you, those startups are going to be multi-billion-dollar startups. It's just too expensive for America. People think that Amazon is just going to take over space, and in some ways they will. But there's so many companies that are going to fail that Amazon can't go out and give each of those companies $100 million for 1,000 companies. It's just not going to happen. So they're very happy to have the ecosystem built outside of them, right? Or to have all the companies built outside of them, and then in a few years buy them and bring them in-house. Amazon, Google, they don't have the internal capacity in terms of their own organizational chart, in terms of their own talent, to be able to allocate staff to 1,000 companies. It's just not going to happen. So everybody's outsourcing it, and you want to outsource it where you can get labor cheap and you can get talent cheap, and where there's a talent reservoir. So I see that a lot. So Data Rate, thank you so much for being here. That's Kumar, and I love his dog. Look at that picture of the dog. It's like a young Australian sheepdog, I think, right? So Data Rate says, question for Nitin: what's your take on Pakistan's FATF issue, and how will it impact the defense spend? And the FATF is the gray list, right? Pakistan is still on the gray list for its involvement in terrorism and for not cracking down on terrorism, because they've got a real big problem with terrorism over there.
Well, of course, FATF is an albatross around Pakistan's neck, and it's a self-inflicted injury, really, because they have been the only important export, if I can call it, from Pakistan has been terrorism the world over, not just to India, but to the entire world. So in that sense, they are going to remain for a foreseeable future on the grey list, if not the blacklist, because they will be always protected by their ever reliable friends, China. But that should not affect India's defense spending, of course. But if he means Pakistan's defense spending, which I am sure he means that, will get affected, because the United States has been cutting down the military aid to Pakistan, or the funding to Pakistan. But China has stepped in there. So in a way, Pakistan knows how to leverage its geographical position and also its proximity to India, or being bordering state of India, bordering nation state of India. So Pakistan uses that position to get favors from China. And I don't think the defense spending will ever go down, because the army really holds the whip hand in Pakistan, and it will continue to get what it wants.
Yeah, it's an interesting issue that the generals and Khan, the generals are against Khan and Khan's against the generals, but they're all against everybody else.
That's right.
The corruption in Pakistan has become such a big problem that even China had objections. China had demanded that that Pakistan be included on the gray list once more, because it's affecting their own special economic zones. It's affecting everything that they had planned for the Belt and Road in Pakistan. You have the Balochistan separatists blowing everything up, and there's just a lot of issues going on over there. So Generator 16, thank you again for joining us. How is India building its jungle warfare capability? And they're thinking of a Vietnam scenario.
Oh, well, India has a very good jungle warfare capability. The American special forces come to India's northeast, to a place called Vairante, where there is a special school called the Counterinsurgency and Jungle Warfare School, CIJW, which has been in existence since 1969. So India doesn't have to worry about. India can teach the world and world armies the jungle warfare, because it has been fighting in India's northeast, which is full of jungle since 1956, various insurgencies.
Thank you very much for that. And Sonali is here. So Sona Kushi is here. And if I recall correctly, she's in Malaysia, and it's very early in her morning. So thank you so much for joining us. And she comments, what I've heard from ardent Chinese supporters, that there won't be any real big war. And do you expect that? Do you feel that that's a real assessment?
Well, nobody can predict that, but as I mentioned in the earlier part of this program, that the Chinese don't believe in full-fledged, full-scale wars. They would rather win without fighting, just by applying other tactics like coercion, like inducement, like financial inducements, So therefore, I don't think the real big war is in the offing, but who knows?
And thank you very much for that. And we're going to continue with Mr. Y Singapore. Why every major tech company invests in JIO platforms?
Well, it's called Geo in India, and well, they see value for their investment, good returns. It's a company that has consistently performed and given good returns to their shareholders, and why not? That's a platform that will give them not just a toehold in India, but a big presence in India, and also give them good returns. And that's why I think every major tech company is taking up shares or taking up part investments in geo platforms.
Thank you very much for that. And Samrat D, and I told you the cue that you give us, right? Like I ring the bell, the cue you give us is a little yawn because I know it's late for you, and I so much appreciate your time there. And Samrat D, thank you so much for joining us and looking at that picture. So thank you. Asks, is India's pursuit of strategic autonomy on the back burner now, especially with the U.S.?
Well, no, I don't think that is going to happen because India has its own way of dealing with pressures, even from friends. And despite the bonhomie, the close strategic partnership with United States, India pursues its own policy when it comes to its own national interest. You look at the way India has withstood pressure from Trump administration on the S-400, or the way India deals with Iran when Trump didn't want India to deal with Iran or give them anything or buy their oil from Iran. So there are issues where India will have independent approach. India will like to have its primacy in the region, in the immediate neighborhood, intact, and not allow US to come in there. So therefore, I don't think it's on the back burner, the strategic autonomy.
And we're going to continue on with Vijay Kumar. So thank you again. Where will companies like BrahMos Aerospace Limited fit in the future? And I know that they've announced themselves kind of as part of the BRICS, right? They've been working closely with Russia. So what do you see happening there?
It's a joint venture between India and Russia in any case, that company, BrahMos Aerospace. BrahMos is Brahmaputra and Moskova, rivers put together, the two words put together. And in fact, it's got a bright future because India is looking to, or countries like Vietnam, Philippines, and now I hear Indonesia have evinced very keen interest to buy BrahMos missiles. And if that happens, then there's a new market that opens up. Therefore, it has a fairly good future going forward.
And I think we're going to have to call it a night for you and
Yes.
a day for us. And I was looking, but it's so far up. There have been so many questions that I wanted to see if I could find that URL for you again. So if somebody would be kind enough to visit bharatshakti and just include the URL and send us the URL, not in its .com form, just bharatshakti.in.
That's as simple as that. Yeah,
it's bharatshakti.in. If somebody could send that to us, because I want that to be kind of the closing thing. And here, actually, we're going to close with we're going to have something else while we're waiting for somebody to do that, because people are very kind like that. So TEJ 308 asks, is a disintegrated Pakistan good for India in the long term?
Well, it is certainly good for India, but don't bet on it. It will muddle through. It will not disintegrate, having learned its lessons from 1971. A weak Pakistan is better for India rather than a disintegrated Pakistan, is what I would say.
There you thank you very much, and there we are. So thank you very much for sending that to us, and it was very kind of Generator 16 to do it also. And first, I'm going to have Valina, because we both know her and we both appreciate her so much. Say goodbye and thank you so much for that. And we'll close with Kush. So there is the website, and I know you've got the other website as well. So what is the other website?
It's called stratnewsglobal.com. It's a mouthful, but it's called Strat News, like in Strategic News Global. But the URL is stratnewsglobal.com. I'm sure Kush Agarwal will be able to put in that also. But nevertheless, never mind.
If you could, Kush, that'd be awesome. With Generator 16, so that would be awesome. And I've actually watched some of the videos because that's kind of a new venture for you. And I've watched some of the videos that you put on YouTube, and they're really instructive and informative. You did a really good job.
I do that once a week. It's called Simply Nitin. In fact, it's every Saturday, 7 p.m. India time that we put that explainer, and that there you are. Generator 16 has put that stratnewsglobal.com. So,
and thank you for that, Generator 16. And I think Kush won the battle for it because look what they did. They have both of them there. So
thank you very much. Thank you, Adam.
Yes. Thank you everybody for joining us and allowing Nitin and myself on your feed this afternoon, this morning for Sinai, and this evening for our friends that are joining from India and elsewhere. So thank you for allowing us to be a guest on your feed today, and hopefully we were a good guest and everybody had a nice time with us, and we had a nice time with everybody. So I'm going to say goodbye. Nitin, you're going to stay there. I got this down to an art from now. Stay there. And what I do is I'm going to click end broadcast. We're all going to say goodbye, except Nitin, you and I will still be here. Is that all right? So I want to thank everybody so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Thank you again.
Good night.
Bye-bye. And now I'm pressing the button. Bye.